Let's now cross to Nasrec, where Sakina Kamwendo is standing by to unpack today's proceedings and yesterday's proceedings at the ANC's National Conference. Sakina, a very good morning to you. What can we expect today? You're in conversation with Dr. Levy Ndou, I believe.
Good morning, Lebu. That's correct. Professor Levy Ndou is here with me. And we, of course, will be looking at some of what transpired yesterday. It was, of course, a very long wait for proceedings to get underway here at Nasrec, 8 hours to be exact, but ultimately it did get underway. And the president, he obviously delivered the political report, but didn't get beyond that. But we're going to talk about all of that. And of course, Samkele Maseko was speaking to you earlier. He's on his way to the breakfast that is currently being held or will kick off by the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana. And of course, he will be in conversation with some business people about the economic policy and other issues pertaining to what's taking place here at the 55th National Conference of the African National Congress. Now, Dr. Ndou, 110-year-old organization, and there was a lot said yesterday about just the organizational aspect of this conference. Are we overstating that?
Good morning to you. Good morning to the viewers at home. Yeah, well, a lot has to be spoken about the manner in which the conference is organized, how people got frustrated with the delays and the registration processes and so on and so on. Even though the president says we're quite excited that we have updated our membership system, that is why we have to ensure that everything is digitalized. It has its own hiccups. That's why sometimes people will complain that the system has crashed and so on and so on. But also, when you look at a gathering of this nature, where you're supposed to have beyond 4,000 people to 5,000 people, there are a lot of logistical issues that are involved. Transportation, accommodation, catering, and so on and so on and so on. But you know, this one brought me to another view that says, if you have a very big political party, is it still relevant to have conferences of this nature? Can't we develop other strategies and start doing things differently? Do we need all 4,000 people in the same venue? I know in the ANC they'll say the branch is the basic unit of the organization, but is it practically workable now? If we're looking at the logistical hiccups and all these things that happened here.
And I guess there are other arguments to be made in that regard, because in as much as it is often repeated and instilled that the branches are where the power lies in the African National Congress, when a delegate gets to conference, they don't necessarily have to carry through the branch mandate. They are open to persuasion and therefore can vote in a different direction from the mandate that the branch gave.
Yes, of course. And I think that is what most people should perceive nominations as an idea of what might happen at the conference. Nominations for me is just a process of identifying people that are capable to be elected, who appears to be enjoying popular support amongst branches and provinces. But the actual action happens here at the conference, because whether you like it or not, delegates are able to change the mandate given to them by their branches. They are available to be persuaded. They observe. They are the ones who will be observing and discussing these reports. And based on what is happening at the conference, then they can then say, maybe it's better we have this candidate to take the organization forward. So it's a basic unit of the organization. All discussions will take place there, but they still have to come to a gathering like this one, and then they take decisions based on what they're actually observing and what is actually happening here at the conference.
Now, Dr. Ndou, looking at the political report, and again, can we just distinguish between the political report, the organizational report, the January 8th statement, and an address like the State of the Nation address, for example?
There is a relationship between the political report and the State of the Nation address. You know, I was talking to some of my colleagues yesterday and say, if we keep this report very safely, most of the issues that are mentioned here might be mentioned next year in the State of the Nation address, because it's an overview of what the ANC has been doing in government and in response to the resolutions that were adopted at conference in the past 5 years. So the performance of the ANC in government also has to be gauged based on the political report presented by the president. And at some point, I would sit down and say, maybe these are things that President you should be saying as the head of state, not as the president of the ANC. But the reality is that there is a relationship and fusing together of the resolutions of the ANC and policies and that of government, because the ANC is the ruling party. So they should take their policies, make sure that they are being discussed in government and therefore implemented. And also, a few weeks just before this conference, the president was able to come out and say, we need to be very honest with what we say at conference, because it's a reflection of what we've been doing in government, how we've been able to execute our mandate. So if there are failures, you don't have to be shy to say, this is what we've agreed upon, but we couldn't do good in government, so that those that are coming in or the delegates are able to assess their leadership based on the reality of what is happening.
So speaking of being honest about some of these issues, you take, for example, the president talking about the alliance and the reconfiguration of the alliance, and seem to go off script somewhat, just to impress the point about the sort of discussions that need to happen around that. He spoke about the SACP, for example, considering going on their own ticket in the election, and that delegates needed to reflect on that particular matter, I suppose, a lot more succinctly. But then, in the same speech, the president speaks, for example, about some of the setbacks within the state-owned entities. For example, he speaks about the Zondo Commission report and what that report had said, but not with the same sort of candidness that he spoke about the reconfiguration of the alliance, because I would have thought the president would have at least said, as the ANC, we also need to, introspect about our role, because it is our members who are implicated in this.
The discussion about the reconfiguration of the alliance has been going on for some time. When we're in the student movement, I remember there was a time in which in the student movement, SASCO was saying that the leadership of the alliance has to be changed. And at that time, there was an emphasis by the student formation to say that the SACP should be the leader of the alliance. And there are a number of reasons that they were raising. But the alliance has always been characterized by contradictions, informed by the different constituencies that alliance partners are actually representing. And one, in my view, of the most difficult responsibilities is to be the leader of the alliance, because you should be able to meet the workers' demands, you should be able to meet the demands of the poor and the marginalized, and equally, you also need to be able to meet the demands of the different formations underneath, the different unions, student formations, youth formations, and all of that. And of course, there will be constant contradictions and disagreements in this alliance. So each time when you are an alliance leader, you should always be developing strategies to make sure that your alliance partners are happy, but also ensuring that you also provide that leadership that is required. But when we look at the matters relating to the state capture and the SOEs, it is the ANC that must say, maybe we need to start doing things differently. Whether you like it or not, SOEs in South Africa are collapsing. And
Or have collapsed.
Or have collapsed. Or we just nursing dead animals. And it is in the hands of government and the ANC to develop much better strategies to ensure that these SOEs are back functioning. People were celebrating last week that the train from Johannesburg to Naledi is now operational. Well, they had to celebrate because they were not getting these services for quite some time. You expect the government that should have said, we are on COVID-19 lockdown. Let us continuously be servicing our own infrastructure. Unfortunately, that is not the case. We don't know when load shedding is going to come to an end in South Africa. And we're changing leadership time and time again, but load shedding is continuing. You need that political will on the part of government to say, let's take drastic actions and ensure that this entity is functional. I don't have to talk about Denel, where staff would go for quite some time not receiving their salaries. It is in our hands. These delegates and the leadership of the ANC must provide leadership and ensure that these entities are actually functioning properly.
And so true there, Dr. Levy Ndou, talking about some of the state-owned entities that are on their knees, like Denel, and you can rattle off a list. But of course, there are others that have wholly gone under, where people have lost their jobs. You think of SA Express, you think of Mango, the airline industry particularly hard hit. And as Dr. Ndou says, it is up to the delegates here at the 55th National Conference to actually think long and hard, and for the ANC to do serious introspection to find a way forward to some of these difficulties facing the country. Of course, there'll be more time to talk about a lot more that's going to be happening here at NASREC.